research and development. Before we get started, one of the things that I did to help me, because I'm using a calculator, and I'm not smart enough to have one of those calculators that converts decimals into inches. So I made something like this. Is what I call my cheat sheet. I basically started off with 1/32 equals, 16th equals, 8th equals, 3/16, etc., all the way down. And then I started with my calculator. Take 1/2 equals 0.5, divide that by 2, that gives me 0.25, divide that by 2, that gives me 1/8, which is 0.125. Okay, I write all that down. 1/16 gives me 0.0625, and then 32nd, okay, etc. And I do that, and I do all the way up, and then I can start adding things together. So I have the decimal equivalent from a 16th of an inch all the way up to an inch. And I use this when I'm trying to design a shade. Now, for the sake of argument, we're going to be using also, before we get to the sake of argument, I have this kind of ruler. I believe this is an architect. Okay, and I use this a lot because it has various graduations for where if I'm trying to split, you can see that it's not really good in focus. If I'm trying to split 3/16, okay, how I can split that all the way around, whether I'm using, splitting 3/4 of an inch. Not very well in focus, is that? But, this is the kind of thing that I'm using. If you're going to be really drafting, you'll wind up getting a pen kind of like this. You see, this is one of these really fine point pens, see, which is a lot more finer than just using a honking ballpoint pen. Of course, for me, I have an old-fashioned pencil sharpener, so I'll sharpen pencils, and every time I make the point's good for a couple of marks, and then I have to sharpen it again. Now, for the sake of argument, we have to find, if we want to make like a panel shade, okay, and it doesn't hurt for you to figure out actually what kind of cap or spider you're going to use. This is a 3-way spider, okay. If you're going to make a 6-sided or a 12-sided, you could use something like this for the top. Okay, this is something I salvaged from the silk shades. You see people sell them and they throw them out on a trash pile, and I use bolt cutters to cut these things off. So this is a 4-way. I can trim this down to whatever size I want. If I'm going to make an 8-sided panel or more, an even number, or for the sake of argument, this is a 4-inch vented heat cap. This is what we're going to use for the demonstration. Now, usually, you have to allow for, if this shade was going to go on, let's say it's going to go on a base, okay? So usually, in most cases, let's say if you're going to use a harp, let's see if we can get this in frame. Okay, from the base of the shade, base of the base, underneath the socket, to the top of the socket, it's about 6 inches, or maybe 7 inches. If you're using a harp, which is what would go on in here, okay, you want to have space to allow for the bulb, which would be like 6 inches. I usually use like a 7.5-inch harp because you really want to be able to get your hand up inside to change the light bulb without having to disassemble the entire top of the shade. So let's say you make it 8 inches. Because you don't want to really see all that stuff on the bottom of the shade. So I've set this up. Now, this is 2 inches from here to here, which would be the center of a 4-inch cap. Okay. Now, let's say if we're making, let's say you want to have a 18-inch diameter bottom of your shade. Okay. So, basically, this being the center would be the center of your cap. Okay, this is the edge of the cap being 4 inches. This is 9 inches here, okay, which is part of your diameter of the shade. So you want to find the slope. So you'd actually be going from this corner to that corner, correct, which is about 10.5 inches. So you would make something like this. Okay, you would make something like this to write it down on. Okay, 10.5 inches. And my pen here. Okay, and you write that down. We say 10.5. Say 10.5. Okay, 10.5 inches. Now, a lot of people wind up with this. If your math is really good, okay, if your math is really good, you can use a calculator. Come on, come on, come on, come on. We use a calculator. Now, when using a cap like this, you really need to allow 1/8 of an inch. Allow 1/8 of an inch for the thickness of the glass. Okay, on both sides. So that's basically taking 1/4 of an inch off. Okay, so 4 minus 0.25, which is 1/4 of an inch on either side, equals 3.75, equals 3/4. Okay, 3 3/4. Now, to find the circumference, you multiply that, whether it's the bottom or the top or it's a circle window, whatever you're making, times pi, which is times 3.14 equals. That gives me the circumference of the inside of this. So let's say if you're making a, let's say we're making an 8-sided, or let's say we're making a 6-sided, okay? Divided by 6 equals 1.9625. So we're looking on our cheat sheet. 0.96. That's almost 2 inches. Okay, that's almost a 2-inch top. Okay, and you would write that down. So let's say 1 15/16. 1 15/16. Okay, and the same thing to find the diameter circumference of the bottom of the shade. Okay, we'll clear that out. So we go 9 times 3.14 equals 28.6. Let's make sure. Okay. 9, that's 18. 18 inches times 3.14 equals 56.52. That's almost 56.5 inches. Now we're doing what? A 6? Okay. Divided by 6 equals 9.42. So that's almost 9.5 inches at the bottom. 0.42. So you could say it was 9, and you can make it 9.5. Make it 9 7/16. You write that down. Say 9 7/16. Now you use that. Okay, and you have to really start off, if you're making a panel shade, you really have to start off with your bottom. You have to take a triangle, a right angle, to be able to draw this out, split it in half, okay, and measure for both sides. Same thing for the top. And then use that to make a model. Take corrugated cardboard, okay, and make you a model. So that gives you the slope, the size of the base, and the top. You make a cardboard model to make sure everything fits up. Okay, make sure everything fits up before you go cutting that glass you've been saving for 20 years to make a lampshade out of. That's very important. Okay, some places, some supply stores, maybe on Amazon and other places, they sell round caps. They sell 6-sided caps. They sell 5-sided caps, but it works out a lot better. Okay, if you have the cap before you go and designing the kind of shade that you want. Once you have your framework and your model made and everything works, then you can design. You can use the panels to design whatever kind of shade that you want or how deep it is. If you want to have a smoother curve, then you wind up having to have more pieces. Just like, oh, let me get one down here. Hang on. Got one down. This is a mold that I made using corrugated cardboard, and you can see masking tape circle on the bottom actually to make something like this so it holds up from the top down. Every ½ inch I cut a circle that I glued on the inside. This is what I use masking tape for. Okay, so if you want a smoother curve, you have to have more pieces. This is actually 20 pieces, and to design that I had to do the same thing like I just showed you folks. Okay, and this is kind of the blank. I have the jig that I cut this with. Okay, see, and that's what that is, except for having to cut off a little bit off the bottom to put that scallop on there, and that's a whole other video. Okay, to make a simple shade, but hopefully you kind of get the idea. So you wind up with a framework that you can design your lamp to. Okay, but this is basically how you have to determine the slope. And of course, like I said before, make a model. You know, before you go cutting out a lampshade that, or cutting all your glass out and then find out that you'll wind up having something that's more like a cylinder, if you want a cylinder, or you don't want a cylinder, or a blue fez, or God knows what. Okay, go through that, get your dimensions, make a model, make sure it fits, then you can design your shade and use your blank, actually, like I had shown like this, okay, to basically get your slope and your sides. Huh? See? And of course, this needs to be equal, you know. If your top is 2 inches, then your center line is, you know, 1 inch, etc., etc. So it's not that difficult, but you have to go through this process in order to design shades at the very basics. And domes are a whole different thing. You know, domes are a whole different thing. I've got a couple of videos that I made about, you know, making a pattern for a dome, and I'll post those on YouTube, and I posted those on the other sites too. So God bless. Have a good day. Bye-bye.